silent.
Hi! Welcome to our beautiful stream. I hope the audio levels are okay. Today we have our wonderful setup in a beautiful restaurant. And the reason for that is because we ran a contest in our Discord, over on Facebook, and on Twitter. Let us know if you can hear me well over the music. But yeah, we ran the RevoOolution Spookware Contest, and we had a lot of amazing creative entries, but nothing quite as striking as what our contest winner came up with. So it's my absolute pleasure to introduce Alice. Hi, Alice.
Hello.
And with us, of course, is Charles, who was up for a prize.
I know. Why anybody wanted it, I have no idea. But Alice, thank you so much for both agreeing to do this slightly crazy idea, and also for your amazing picture, and for wearing a Broken Sword 5 t-shirt, which is absolutely incredible. Look at that.
Yeah, she's wearing her Sunday best for you.
Fish it out specially.
Oh,
Anyway.
That's great. And I have an apology to make because I have put my tuxedo, my dinner jacket on, and completely forgot to bring my bow tie, which is so stupid. So all I could find instead was a little red ribbon, which I'll tie around my neck and hope that nobody notices.
And nobody will.
And nobody will. So Wendy, you are our waiter or server or whatever.
Yes. I'll be the waitress for the
Great.
evening. If you need anything at all, you can always come to me and ask. But for now, I'll let you enjoy your beautiful, wonderful, elegant pizza date.
Yeah, no, that's great. And Wendy, we know that Alice has a pizza on the way.
Yes, Alice has a pizza on the way, and to keep compliant with social distancing, we made so that our guests sit very far apart and are in fact
Indeed.
on iPads.
And this is waiting, Alice, for your pizza. Okay, so it's not a Scotch egg, which is what it looks like.
What is
it? Comes from the Italian deli. It's rice filled with something. It's rice with it's not. It looks a little bit strange, but I think it's fairly reasonable. So, Alice, thank you so much for entering. Before we do, just to put this in context, and for anybody who's watching, could we look at some of these amazing pictures? Which I have to say, I had a look at. I think Wendy, when did you? I think over the weekend, and they were brilliant. They were brilliant. So can we have a look at some of them?
Yes, we absolutely can. So over the time, we had some amazing entries, and it was really, really hard to pick a winner. I remember I had to poke Charles quite a few times to finally make the call.
You did.
But yeah, we're going to put up some of the most beautiful entries that we had over the time. So we're going to start with obviously with Alice's first, just to know what the competition was up against. So this one is, let me get the titles right. I have a spreadsheet. So this is called, gosh damn it, I'm not being very professional, am I? Why don't you introduce your own work? Sorry, Alice. Why don't you talk about your piece of art?
Well, it's called The Chilling Tale of Lady Fairmont.
Yes.
A classic pun on Lady Fairmont, who was one of the best characters in the Broken Sword series.
Yes,
and it shows Nico looking actually rather nice.
Yeah,
and George...
a bit like the Evil Doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah. She seems that way, I think.
She's the sort of Frankenstein character. He's like the Doctor that's gone green, and Nico is just looking very mean, very very moody, isn't she? That's beautiful. So, what I was going to ask is, is you're well. Let's talk about the fact that you're wearing a Broken Sword T-shirt. I mean, that's absolutely brilliant. So that must mean that you were a Kickstarter backer.
Yes. Yeah.
And that is, thank you so much. And I'd love you to talk about. Would you mind just telling us a little bit about how you found that whole Kickstarter experience?
Oh, it was great. One of the things I really loved about the whole time was you had the forums then, and so many people were so active on those forums. And I was sharing art back then actually that I'd done about Broken Sword 5, and I met quite a lot of really nice people. We called ourselves the Goats, who still exist, and we all came to your release event for Broken Sword 5.
Oh, that I remember that with just such happiness, because we had a musician, Miles Gilderdale, I think came. We had a musician. Miles Gilderdale lives in York. I mean, he plays in the local pubs, but he also plays in Acoustic Alchemy, who play all over the world. I mean, they're a really amazing group. Then you got to meet Barrington Feelong as well.
Yeah, he was lovely.
He's quite something, or he was quite something. He very, very sadly passed away recently. And then his wife, you probably didn't get to talk to Heather, but Heather is absolutely wonderful. And I remember when we were first writing Broken Sword. Sorry, if my heater goes on, if it makes too much noise, I'll turn it off. But in fact, I am going to turn it off. Sorry. There we go.
He doesn't want you to be warm.
It's just turned itself back on again. Anyway, what was absolutely amazing in the early 90s was that we were trying to put together a dream team for this game that was going to be called Broken Sword. And I'd actually played cricket with...
We can't hear it, Charles. It's fine.
There you go. It's been turned off at the socket now, so it can't possibly fail. So I'd actually played cricket with Barrington when he, I think he'd just come to England, and he was he might even still been a student, and we were really good friends. And I remember he was very exotic. He took me out for dinner, and we had caviar, which I'd never had before. Caviar on toast, very, very small bits of dried toast with vodka. It was unbelievable. I'd never had anything like it before in my life, and it just felt so exotic. And so then I got back in touch with him in the early 90s and said I was writing video games and would he like to compose the music? And I was delighted. He said he would. And he came up to York, and I remember him telling me about this really beautiful young woman who called Heather. And he just went on and on about how beautiful she was. And then turned out that she was an adventure fan, and they got married. And it was and this I'm really impressed by, because they very kindly invited my wife and me to come, and it was at 7 o'clock in the morning under a billabong tree in a place called Beaufort, which is about an hour's drive from Melbourne. And the reason that it was 7 o'clock in the morning was that it meant it would be finished and we could all get to the Melbourne cricket ground to watch the first ball between South Africa and Australia played without missing anything at all. So, and she shared his absolute passion for cricket, but in particular, she loved adventure games. So what she would do is she'd play through the game again and again and again and record it. And she'd actually come up with the points at which there should be composition. And then he, very late in the day, would go through and compose it that way. So it was an incredible, bit of teamwork between the two of them. And sadly, we won't be able to work with them again, which is a terrible shame. But I've talked a lot. Tell me what your memories of that was, that event.
I was quite young at the time. I think I was 19, and it was the first time I travelled to London on my own, and I did it because I was so excited to be able to go. And I remember being there for the conference, meeting everyone. Sat and had lunch with Tony and the rest of the goats.
Oh, brilliant!
In a slug and lettuce around the corner. We attended your event. We got comic books signed. Got my book here still, actually. It's all my signatures in from you guys.
Oh, brilliant!
then we went to the BAFTA house afterwards, which was very nice. It was
Yeah.
very generous.
Oh, how
to let us
amazing.
come, actually, just letting away.
Sorry?
Reason. You let us all come to the BAFTA house.
Yeah. You know, I mean, honestly, and let me tell you, I've said this a million times, but I'm going to say it again. When I started writing games, which was actually in the 80s, you met people. You met we met our fans, for want of a better term, and it was great. And then we get pulled further and further back because instead of selling directly at what we called microfairs, or called microfairs, where we just had tables and you actually talked to people, then the retailers came dominant, and then the publishers became dominant. So by the time RevoOolution started in 1990, our games were commissioned by publishers who then sold the game to retailers, who then sold it to our audience. So we had absolutely no idea who was playing our games. The closest that we had was through magazines, where we'd read what people said. So imagine, I mean, I'm really thrilled that you were excited to come, but imagine how excited we were for the first time to be able to actually meet the people that we'd sort of heard about. And obviously at that point we'd had the Kickstarter campaign, which was just incredible, wasn't it? I mean, from my perspective, it was incredible. And there was so much passion. And you, Order of the Goaters, I mean, the whole thing just kind of took off. It was crazy. So I mean, I'm really thrilled to hear that you were excited, but from our perspective, it was just incredible. And we were lucky to be working with Apple. Apple were very supportive. And before the launch, I remember we'd met with the guys who are very just above, actually, the guys who are part of Apple development. And I'd asked for an introduction to the manager at the Apple store. He was a fellow called Robin Lingwood, and we went down and we chatted. And I was rather cheeky, and I said, I don't suppose we could, use your you have an event, an Apple event. And he said, yeah, well, we've got Robbie Williams next week, and we've got the cast of the Vampire Diaries, in 3 weeks' time. We've got nothing in 2 weeks, so, if you want to do it then. And I went, this is incredible. And I said, because we were really poor, and I said, how much does it cost? He said, oh, it doesn't cost anything. It doesn't cost anything. And that's one of the reasons why I love Apple in particular, because this was a completely different relationship. The way that they saw it was that, if our games were successful on their platform, then that was good for their platform. So we were very much in it together. So it wasn't a zero-sum game at all. It was a win-win. And this was so refreshing compared to the relationship that we had with publishers, which was generally, the better the deal they could get from the developer, the more money they made, and obviously vice versa. And, Apple, throughout our relationship, which has now been going for 10 years, have very much been on the win-win. I mean, the big thing that we did was, I don't know if you remember something called the 12 Days of Christmas. I don't know if you're an Apple person.
No,
but we did something called it. Yeah. And we were, and Tony was so desperately loyal, and a wonderful guy called Joost Peters, who was a huge... Did you meet him as well?
I'm not sure if he was there, but I know who he is. Yeah,
Joost was a huge. Well, I'm going to have to let you say something because but let me just finish this because it's all part of the same thing. We wrote Beneath the Steel Sky for PC in MS-DOS. So MS-DOS was Windows only really came into existence in the, I'm going to make a fool of myself, but let's say the early 90s or even the mid 90s. So before that, everything was written in MS-DOS, which is where you basically type commands into the computer, into the PC. And so when Windows 98, I believe it was, stopped supporting MS-DOS, it basically meant that nobody could play the game. So from our perspective, Beneath the Steel Sky and our first game, Year of the Temptress, were effectively gone. And then a wonderful group of adventure enthusiasts called Scum VM surfaced around about 2000. And they got in touch, and Joost was one of them, and asked if we would be interested in giving them our source code so they could convert it. And there were three of them. that converted it and put an awful lot of work in to get the game running under their own engine, ScumVM. And the most amazing thing is that the game is now still available. And we were absolutely sure. What used to happen in retail is that after a year, a game was forgotten about. So the idea that we would absolutely, still be playing the game, and we've just put into submission an update for Beneath the Steel Sky, because we had a problem. We had a problem when the operating the iOS. There were just problems. Anyway, we fixed those problems now. But the idea that we would be talking about Beneath the Steel Sky 27 years later, it's just absolutely crazy. It's crazy. It would have been unthinkable. But that is because ScumVM effectively took it and rescued it and rewrote it. I mean, unbelievable. But anyway, sorry, Alice. I'm kind of rather dominating this conversation. It's meant to be a two-way thing. I'm really, really excited to hear that you are studying or reading creative writing and English and with computer games as one of your modules. I really, please, I'd love to hear more about that.
The main reason I chose to do games really was because I absolutely love your games. The strong narrative sort of focus of them, like the stories are so interesting, and you learn a little bit about history from them, which I think is great. I remember first playing, I think it was Broken Sword 3 with my family when I was quite young, and it just completely sucked me into gaming. And since then I've been quite a big fan of games, especially adventure games and point and click and all that, and especially old games.
Oh, brilliant!
So I'd really like one day to be able to do something similar. Like games writing is really interesting, and I never really thought about doing it before as well, which is weird.
So, what tipped you into what made you decide to study creative writing?
It's so broad. There's a lot you can do with it, I think.
That's amazing.
Limited by form either. Some of the things I've submitted recently have actually been images. And for example, you can submit a game, so it's not just writing in itself.
Wow. That's fantastic. I often say, have you written games?
Not a whole game.
No. But you have written. I mean, have you written adventure games? Have you written a part of an adventure game?
Yeah. So my recent assignment that I had to submit today actually was to pitch a game idea. So I've come up with a concept, and then I have to script a portion of it for my assessment in December. So you do quite a lot of.
Pitch it to us.
Oh, what, you want me to pitch my game?
Yeah, go on.
Oh gosh, okay. It is called Sheila, or The Aboriginal Adventure of Sheila. The protagonist is a woman called Sheila, who is Australian with Aboriginal heritage, and she goes on an adventure, much like George does, based on the Australian Dreamtime stories. So their myths and legends, and the idea is to play with those myths and legends because they're a really good story, and much like how you use real history to make the stories of your games. So that's, I might have borrowed that idea for mine. And she travels across Australia, solving puzzles, going on adventure, and that's all I got so far.
Well, that sounds great. And do you have a particular interest in Australia, or is this just the dream time? Because there's always been a sort of Western fascination, hasn't there, with the Aboriginal culture and the stories that they tell.
Yeah, well, I suppose it's a recent thing, being interested in Australian culture. But I just think it's fascinating. Australia has like a whole outback. Like, more of Australia is the outback than it is like a populated city that people sort of consider to be typically Australian, I suppose. And I thought it was quite a good backdrop for a game, because there's so much opportunity to explore like this outback. There's so many myths and legends surrounding it and history.
So, as somebody that's completely unbiased in your opinions, would you say that it's easier writing linear stories or multi-linear adventure games?
I mean, I think linear. We've
I
studied
think so too.
like a few different ones, and like I thought about when I was creating the game potentially doing a branching narrative, but I think for the purpose of a good story, a linear narrative with maybe the odd Easter egg or something works better.
Sorry, I'm talking about, when I say linear, I mean like a book. If you were to write just a story on, just a normal story, would you find that? Do you find that as challenging as writing a game where you have branching narratives?
I think I try and think of them in the same way to keep it more simple for myself. So yeah, writing a linear story with a kind of set A to B point really seems easier to get your head around.
Yeah, it's with the interesting thing, I think, is that with film, of course, you read a script, you write a script, you read a script, you know that each page is roughly a minute.
Yeah.
You know that as long as you can read that script and get a reasonable understanding of what the writer is trying to convey, you should be able to get a concept of what that film or play or whatever is going to be if it's well executed. Video games are not like that at all, because it's really, really hard. Oh, your pizza!
Thank you.
Excellent. Because the first of all, people, I think, are more critical when they play a game because you're trying to work out what the solutions are. If there is a weakness in the story, then it will be highlighted. I mean, if you think of some wonderful films that have enormous gaps in the plot, and they can get round it by, the trickery, we simply don't have that. So I think we have to be much, much more cautious and much more careful in the way that we write the stories, because they're going to come under greater scrutiny. Because obviously, when you play a game, you're looking for clues. You're looking for clues in the story and the dialogue. In film writing, called Robert Mckee. Have you ever heard of Robert Mckee?
I don't think so. No.
He comes to London. He goes all over the world, and he's a bit of an abrasive character, I have to say. I'm not sure many people would say they like him, but what he does do is he talks about the structure of film and film writing. And what he starts off by saying is the reason that Hollywood dominates is not because we're American, but precisely the opposite, because after the Second World War, before the Second World War, Europe had this incredible, cinema tradition. And, particularly look at those wonderful Italian films and British films and German films. And the war, after the war, so many people and so many talented storytellers emigrated to America, and that Hollywood really hoovered up those great minds, and that the Hollywood is just really distilling the knowledge from those great European filmmakers, and then adding a bit of its own sheen on top of that. So. If you have the opportunity, it is well worth going to see him when he comes to London next. And the reason I mention that only is that when we were writing Broken Sword, I actually went to watch. I went and attended one of his lectures, and I found it really, really interesting in cementing some of the ideas. And I remember one of them actually was the idea that I love the Templars, but at the same time, our Neo-Templars were bad, and actually reconciling the fact that we would bring back the Khan character, make him a good guy, we would reverse that. And what Robert Mckee was talking about, the structure, and actually in my mind, I was only thinking about Broken Sword and what I could do to, make the game, the story better. So anyway, that would be my bit of advice.
That's
So
really
I'm going to do the same.
I like that fact about Khan.
Yeah, no, that was great. So I have no idea what this is. So, Wendy.
Yes. What
Wendy's
can I do for you?
Oh, great. So there she is. Isn't it wonderful that we can eat our dinner, Alice, with Wendy standing there ready with a white cloth over her arm,
Yes.
ready to help us in any way that we want. Aha! So, right. I won't speak with my mouth. Or maybe, I'll tell you what, Alice, maybe we should take turns. So you've pitched your walkabout idea. You told me earlier that you were at Falmouth.
Yes.
So tell me how Falmouth is. It's got a very good reputation. We hear fantastic things about. Tell me a little bit about your course.
So my course is English and Creative Writing. I'm in my second year. I think the uni's absolutely amazing. It's quite a small uni. They specialise in creative arts, so even though I'm on an English course, you still have the creative writing. It's still very creative, and all the lecturers there are just fantastic. Like, they're really great, really easy to talk to. Like, I don't know, if anyone is watching the stream and thinking about university, I recommend Falmouth. It's absolutely brilliant, and it's in Cornwall, which is really beautiful.
And you said you're quite close to the sea.
Yeah, very close. Yeah. I mean.
And you were telling me you're a surfer.
Yeah, I took up surfing last year. I'm not very good, but it's fun. It's fun to mess around in the sea.
Well, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
How good is not very good?
Not very good. You can tell I'm new. But it's still good fun. Have you ever tried it?
I'll tell you what I did a couple of years ago, which was absolutely amazing. It was kite surfing.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of kite surfing where I come from, actually. Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, but it's terrifying.
Yeah, it looks
It's absolutely terrifying because I went with my son to Cape Verde, and we stayed in this sort of it was nice, but it's just like a complex, eat all you can complex. But on the beach, there was a kite surfing school. And, for those who don't know about kite surfing, what you do is you strap yourself in, and then you have a harness. And then you have this this enormous great kite, and you can pull the bar in and out. And if you pull it in, then what happens is it changes the angle. And I think what really inspired me was that there was a video which you might have seen of some kite surfers in Brighton, and they actually jump over Brighton Pier in a storm, and it's just unbelievable, because what you can do is you can actually jump by angling the kite and then pulling it to maximum power, and you literally take off if you've got a strong wind. Mm-hmm. And so these guys were in this hurricane wind, and they were doing figures of 8. The insanity of jumping over Brighton Pier. I'm like, imagine if they hit it. It would have been disastrous. It would have been catastrophic.
There's some people where I live that are good at doing that. They, I think they challenge themselves to jump as far as they possibly can. And there's a lot of, I don't know what you call them, sandbanks. And those sandbanks are pretty big in some cases, and they'll jump right over them. When they post videos, it looks mad. It looks fun though.
So Charles,
yeah,
we have a request from Matt, who's watching, to talk about swimming from Alcatraz.
Oh right. Well, I was thinking of swimming from Alcatraz. Yes. So Alice, I don't know if you picked up on this. It was done for charity. Swimming from Alcatraz, the March. Yeah, it was March before last. And in York, we're very lucky. We have a wonderful restaurant called Ambiente. So if anybody comes to York, you must go to Ambiente. They have 3 in York. They have 1 in Hull and 1 in Leeds. But the owners and the managers are Tim and Zoe, who are both great people. And Rolf Saxon, who plays George, and I were, and my wife were in Ambiente. I think it was the Christmas before that, and Rolf had got his new girlfriend, Julie, and we were kind of showing off and going, yeah, we should swim from Alcatraz. Yeah, we should swim from Alcatraz. What a great idea. And that would have been fine, except that Zoe walked past at that moment. And Zoe is a force of nature. And she said, oh, yes, no, I'd like to do that with you. And we went, yeah. Anyway, I did some research, and there's the most wonderful video of, just by Alcatraz, of a great white shark actually coming up and grabbing a sea lion, and there's just like blood everywhere. It's extraordinary. In fact, there are two sharks, and they kind of rip this thing to bits, and the sea just turns red. So obviously, I hadn't accounted for the sharks. Then the other thing is that the sea lions are pretty nasty as well. The males will come and they'll drag people down, and quite a few people have had to be taken to hospital, and that's swimming locally, not in the middle of the the bay. And then thirdly, of course, there are the currents. So it felt like to me like it was a pretty silly idea. Oh, and also I'd got a really bad foot. Don't know what it was. I could hardly walk. Something terrible had happened to my foot. So I was sitting there having dinner with my family, and in walked Zoe. This was about 6 months later, and she said, Charles, when are we swimming from Alcatraz? And I said, look, so and she's told me that I'm welcome to tell this story, and she's brilliant. She said, and I said, oh gosh, your hair looks amazing. It looks fantastic. She said, thank you. And she said, so when are we swimming from Alcatraz? And I pointed out the fact that there were sharks. I pointed out that the currents were absolutely brutal, that the sea lions and my bad foot. And she looked at me and she said, yeah, I've just had a mastectomy. And as I was lying in bed, I was thinking how nice it would be. What?
This is a dinner.
Yeah, no, I know, but it's a great story. I think the story should trump the dinner. Yeah, I'm going to finish. And she said, I've just had a mastectomy, and I was thinking how nice it would be to swim from Alcatraz with you. And, obviously I waved, and I said, oh, I'm so sorry. She said, no, that's absolutely fine. But the hair that you've just complimented, or that your wife has just complimented, is, of course, a wig, because I have no hair. I went, no. She said, you're fine for the moment, because actually I'm going to go and have my second mastectomy. But I'll be out, in a few months. So, Charles, honestly, she said, I'm so sorry to hear about your poor foot, your bad foot. But let me ask you again, when are we swimming from Alcatraz? And honestly, there was no choice. And she was absolutely brilliant. And we raised quite a lot of money for cancer. And she came out. And the really nice thing was that it was part of, and we trained quite hard. We went to Scarborough and Filey, which is on the east coast of England, and the North Sea. And at one point, I went swimming with Zoe around in a lake, and it was 2 degrees. It was so cold. It was just outrageously cold. And we got out, and we could hardly see. We were kind of staggering all over the place. And a doctor friend said, you were suffering from hypothermia. It was insane.
Cool.
But then we did it. But what was lovely is that we did it at a time called, there's a conference every year. And sadly, it wasn't possible this year, called Game Developer Conference in San Francisco. And we did it around then, which was March last year. And it was wonderful because our friends were there. But I hope, Alice, that if you do decide that you want to join the games industry, you will find that people are just so nice. They are, and developers get on really well with each other. And changing the subject, and one of the reasons that developers get on with each other is because we're not actually competitors. So the film people hate each other, television people hate each other, and that's partly because, if one gets a commission, it means that the other one hasn't got the commission. You are competing. Whereas for us, it's a totally global industry. If somebody buys one of these adventure games, one of our adventure games, it doesn't mean they won't buy, or rather, if they buy, Monkey Island or whatever, it doesn't mean they won't buy Broken Sword. It actually means they will buy Broken Sword because they'll be drawn into adventure games and they'll play lots of them. Yeah. So we have every reason to get on really well with our so-called competitors, and it's just lovely to meet up with them and just have a really, really good time.
Yeah. That's
so
great.
Do you want to? Right, I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm going to eat some more food and let you speak. Would you like to write adventure games and narrative games.
Yeah, definitely. It's a lot of fun. Like, I think it's a more fun way to approach writing as opposed to just saying, I'm going to write a book, or I'm going to, which there's nothing wrong with, but the way I see it, writing puzzles, writing a mystery, something like that, is very interesting. And I think you get to know your characters as well, like George and Nico, like such likable characters. And I suppose you get to know them in a different way if they're a game character, because you're almost trying to be them while you're playing the game.
Which is your favourite, George or Nico?
George, he's so funny. Oh, the humour. That's like a huge part of what makes your game so great. I mean, even when I was doing my my piece of art, making George look as funny as possible screaming was half of my intention. Because he's just that kind of character. Like, anything he does can be quite funny.
You do have Nico looking quite stern.
Yeah. She is though, isn't she, throughout? Like, she's got this kind of like a, oh god, George kind of attitude sometimes.
The reason, when we came up with the characters, I don't know, I'll tell you, it might be interesting or it might not. But it was actually Nico that came first.
Really?
Because I've always loved going to Paris, and the story I tell, which is when I was probably 7 or 8, maybe or 9, which is terrifying because that would have been around about 1970. So I was born in 1962, so it would have been around about 1970, going to Paris, and after Britain was really poor after the Second World War, and it was poor for several decades. And France was much richer. In fact, the whole of continental Europe was much richer. We'd effectively been bankrupted. And everything, because of the Industrial Revolution being in London, everything was gritty and sooty and dark and satanic mills. And Paris was bright, and because they hadn't had that sort of level of industry in Paris as we had in London. It just was bright and it was beautiful and it was happy. And my uncle, who was such a cool guy, he was a communist who had to escape Portugal, because Portugal under Salazar and Franco in Spain, they'd become fascist, and obviously they were persecuting or killing communists. So he became he took refuge in Paris, and he looked just like Che Guevara with his sort of gitan, and he loved good wine, and he plied me with really good, I was about 11 or 12 or 10, 11, 12, I don't remember, plied me with really good red wine, which made me feel so ill the next morning. But that was my first hangover. But so I have these incredible memories of going over there, particularly with my mother. And so in many ways, you know, that obviously it's later than that, but the idea of Paris was what Broken Sword was all based on. In fact, it goes back to meeting with a friend who was our publisher at Virgin Interactive, Sean Brennan. And I'd known Sean for 5 or 6 years. We were kind of friends. We were friends through the industry, but we'd become friends. And he'd just read a book called Foucault's Pendulum by Umberto Eco. And in Foucault's Pendulum, they mention the Templars. And he said they'd make great anti-heroes. Now, he was after a much more violent and a much more visceral game. But I actually, read Foucault's Pendulum, and then an insane book called The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, which is what Dan Brown used as the basis for the Da Vinci Code. Mm-hmm. And this history, just this wonderful, wonderful medieval history, came sort of pouring off the page. So, I mean, did this inspire? Do you have any interest in this era? Did you have any interest, or do you through Broken Sword?
Through Broken Sword. I was quite young when I started playing the game, so I wouldn't really have had much awareness of the Templars, any of their connection to Europe. But playing the games, did spark a bit of an interest in it. And
the interesting thing actually is that before then, nobody had heard of the Templars. So when Broken Sword released, unless you'd read Holy Blood and Holy Grail or Foucault's Pendulum by Umberto Eco, nobody knew about it. So we kind of very much created that zeitgeist in many ways, which Dan Brown then obviously, harnessed. Have you ever read the Da Vinci Code?
I haven't read it. No. A lot of English people I know don't have nice things to say about it.
No. Well, I wouldn't like to say, except that I shall tell you how it starts. An American comes to Paris and hooks up with this French. Is she a journalist? She's probably not a journalist. I can't remember what she is. And they almost get killed in a conspiracy involving the Knights Templar. Now, does that sound familiar?
Yeah. Can't think where. Yeah.
So obviously, Ron Howard, who directed the film, has much more expensive lawyers than I do, as does Dan Brown. So I would never make the accusation directly. But a lot of fans of Broken Sword are pretty sure that a young Dan Brown must have, or might well have played the game. And if he did, then that's great. But what he actually did was he read a book called Holy Blood and Holy Grail, which is absolute lunacy. I mean, it's the one that he bases the book on, and it's the idea that something called the Priory of Sion, and that the Priory of Sion existed, was formed at the same time as the Knights Templar, and has been guarding the offspring of Jesus to this day. And a whole generation of people really believe this nonsense. But I'll tell you, writing Broken Sword is such fun. And one of the, I mean, there's so much serendipity as well. So if I could just tell you one story, which I just think is, which just excites me. But I was, my family was staying with a school friend of mine in the Dordogne. And this was nothing to do with Broken Sword whatsoever. We just were hanging out. And my son and I were canoeing down the Dordogne, and my wife and daughter were waiting in a place called Souillac, beautiful little village, 200 people on the banks looking out over the Dordogne. And my wife got a bit bored, and she walked off and found a little church. And then opposite the church was a tiny little art gallery. So she walked in, and on the table was a book which had the Cross of Knights Templar on. Now, at this point, I was actually advising Ron Howard on the film of the Da Vinci Code. So, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But anyway, she picked it up, and a man walked up to her who spoke no English, and she speaks no French, or virtually none, and asked her why she was interested. And she started explaining. This was a guy called Jean-Luc Chamois, who had actually interviewed the guy who claimed to be the Grand Master of the Priory of Sion in the 70s. So in this tiny little village of 200 people, through complete serendipity, we met what probably the world's most knowledgeable person on all of this stuff. It was just incredible, just incredible. So I have a big admission to make, and that is that I believe that there are these incredible, forces that are going on around us, and that actually it isn't all about it isn't all about probability, and it isn't all about science. That there are other things as well, because just the most incredible things happen.
Yeah.
Am I sounding like a lunatic?
Comes together like that. No, I'm inclined to agree with you. If something comes together so well like that, under such odds, yeah. No, I think it's meant to be.
It is. It is what's meant to be. And the other story I tell, and forgive me because you've probably heard this one, but talking of that, was that I had been invited to consult on the game of the Da Vinci Code. And, obviously I'd read the book, and it's, not the world's greatest book, but it's a page turner, and it was incredibly popular at that time. And the publisher at the time was a company called Take Two in Los Angeles. And a very nice man, Bill Gross, phoned me up, and I said, well, I'm very flattered to be asked. I'm not sure. And then a couple of days later, he said, look, I know you haven't agreed, but could you fly out to Los Angeles to meet with Ron Howard? Now, I don't know if you know who Ron Howard is, but he's the director of the Da Vinci Code. He's also the director. He got an Oscar for A Beautiful Mind. He directed Senna. He's the one where the airplane flies into the Hudson. Can't remember that one. Sully, I think it's called. So he's one of the big directors in Hollywood. So I said I will, but I haven't. I know nothing about what this game. I don't even know. I know nothing at all. He said, "You don't need to know anything. You don't need to know anything. Just come along." So I said, "So you're going to pay me a consultancy fee? I'm going to fly over to Los Angeles. I don't need to say anything." He said, "That's exactly it." All right. So I thought this was absolutely fantastic. I thought, this is the way that the film people live. I mean, what isn't there not to love about it? And, I got up the next morning and went into the studio, and it was all Hollywood and, and little buggies going around, and, it was all very cool, thinking this is fantastic. And the senior vice president of Sony Pictures, a very, very nice woman called Julie, I don't remember her surname, met me, and she said, "Charles, we're so pleased that you've come. Thank you so much. This is going to be really quite contentious. So if I was you, I'd sit at the back and just say nothing." I went, "That's what I've been told to do." So, and it was fantastic. And people came and they went, and it was all like, it was just great. It was exactly what I expected from a film studio. And in walks Ron Howard eventually with his entourage of lawyers. And he says, "Guys, I've got 15 minutes and I've just come to tell you that there's not going to be a game." And Julie says, "Ron, these guys have signed a contract. There's going to be a game." He went, "Okay. In that case, it's got to come 6 months after the film." "No," Ron says, "Julie, the contract says it's going to be day and date. It has to be day and date. That's what's going to happen." "Okay," says Ron. "In that case, there can't be any marketing." And everyone's looking at each other. And Julie says, "Ron, there's going to be a film. It's going to be day and date. And there's going to be marketing, because that's what the contract says." So he turns around to his lawyer, and the lawyer goes, "I'm afraid that's what the contract says." You can see he's really up. He says, "So Julie, what are you going to do with my story?" And Julie, as cool as a cucumber, says, "Ron, I'm so pleased you asked that question, because we've flown this guy all the way from England, and he's going to tell you what we're going to do with your story." So everybody looks around the room from this guy from England who's going to tell Ron Howard all about his story, including me. And I'm looking around, and it becomes obviously clear that I am the guy from England who hasn't got the first clue and hasn't been set up for this whatsoever. So all eyes are on me. And he says, "So what do you know?" And I said, "Well, I know about the Knights Templar." And he went, "How come?" And I said, "Well, my wife and I were invited to one of those cathedrals, Worcester Cathedral." And I said, we were invited to a Knights Templar ceremony, and it was great. And he went, "Oh." So he said, "Where do you come from?" I said, "Well, I come from the city of York in England, which of course is where Constantine the Great was declared emperor." Now, I didn't know if you know this, but Constantine the Great, this great emperor, great Roman emperor, who converted the whole of that world, the Roman world, to Christianity in around about 300. He was declared emperor in York, just outside my window. And Ron says, "I thought it was Constantinople." I went, No. It was York in England." He goes, "Oh." And you could see the mood beginning to change. So he said, "So what are you going to do with my story?" And I sat there for a minute, obviously no idea. And I said, "Ron, it's all about the symbolism." And the reason I said that is that Robert Langdon is a symbolologist or whatever. It's a made-up word. And Robert Langdon is the star of the Da Vinci Code. I should have. So, of course, it was all I could say. And he said, "Do you know what? I think it's all about symbolism too. I'm so excited. Can you give me an example?" And I looked sagely at him, and I said, "Yes, Ron, I can. I'll give you an example of what we plan to put into the game." And there was a pause, and everybody looked at me, and everybody held their breath. And I said, "In medieval painting, the situation will change in terms of the setting, in terms of the art style, in the way the characters are depicted. but the symbolism is always the same. And he looked at me. I said, the Virgin Mary will always be depicted in blue, and Mary Magdalene will always be depicted in red. And a medieval audience would always have known the symbolism of those two colours in a painting. He looked at me, and he looked at his writer, who's called Kiva Goldman, and he said, I see it now. Sophie Nerveux walking out of Rosslyn Chapel, and she's wearing a shawl. And Akiva Goldsman looked and went, yeah, that's a great. And they looked at me and says, is it blue or red? I said, red for Virgin Mary. Sorry, red for Mary Magdalene, blue for the Virgin Mary. And this meeting that was meant to take 15 minutes went on for an hour. And he got in his intern who'd been doing work, and we kind of got on like a house on fire. And I gave him all of these ideas, all of which went into the film. So, of course, I was very excited when the credits ran, because I knew that he was going to include me in the credits. But of course he didn't. So, but it was great because they went ahead and they made the game, and it was all really, really fun. And then the film was reasonably successful, but then the film for Angels and Demons that followed it wasn't. So that was the end of that particular. But it was fun, and I have to say, I really love working with people from the other creative industries, like Dave Gibbons for Beneath the Steel Sky.
Yeah.
And Dave is such a great guy. Did you follow any of the Beneath the Steel Sky and Beyond the Steel Sky?
Yeah, I loved Beyond the Steel Sky. That was such a good game. Really.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Oh, bless you. Oh well, imagine. Oh, that's really kind. You are a perfect person to have as this virtual dinner companion. But what we did was we wanted to attend New York Comic Con, which was last year, and Dave was there because of Watchmen and HBO, and he agreed to kind of hang out and see some journalists and everything. And Dave is just such a nice bloke. I mean, it's just a real pleasure working with him, and super smart as well. But I guess that's no surprise. But I remember walking through Times Square with him, and there were enormous, great electronic posters of Watchmen, and this was what he created in the 80s. And I just was really jealous. I was really jealous because this was what he produced with of course Alan Moore, and now it's gone absolutely crazy with through Netflix. It's brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah.
Are you a Watchmen fan? As I take another bite.
Yeah, I have one of the modern versions of the book, and I really like. They did a series. I can't remember what year it was. They did Beyond Watchmen or After Watchmen. This is testing my memory. They did like a companion series, sort of like after the events of Watchmen,
right?
Before Watchmen, sorry, and they were really good as well. So
oh, great!
I knew about Watchmen before you guys collaborated. So when I knew he was going to be working on your games as well, I was like, oh, how good! And I think he really did bring to life the characters again as well.
Well, what Dave did was he designed the characters and worked very closely and came up with a real sort of quirkiness. But what he also did was, I generally am very jealous of the story, and I'm also quite jealous of the core game design itself. And we have a wonderful team, and they're very long-suffering because I can be quite autocratic, which is not good, but you kind of have to, because otherwise you have to drive the vision. And Dave is terrific, as Barry was, in that if we collaborate, they have to accept that the gameplay trumps everything. Of course, the story is vital. Of course, all of these things are vital. But ultimately, the gameplay trumps, and the way that the story and the gameplay interweave with each other trumps everything else, and it has to. And what was amazing working with these really talented guys was that they utterly accepted that. They were excited to work in video games, but they accepted that their contribution was massive, but ultimately it was a contribution to a vision but what Dave was able to do, as Rolf Saxon does on Broken Sword, to be quite honest with you, is get involved quite early in the story and make suggestions and what works and doesn't work. I mean, for Rolf, what he does is he gets involved really quite early, because he's obviously been George in all 5 of the Broken Sword games, and he is in many ways the guardian, because he is going to have to read those lines. He is going to have to build a relationship with Nico when they're recording the lines together, and so he takes that very, very seriously. He goes, well, look, this isn't quite what I think I would say, and it's not quite what, the relationship with Nico. And he then helps us, hone the dialogue. But also what that allows to happen is for when we go to the studio, if some of the actors aren't quite sure what's going on, then Rolf is able to step in and guide them, which gives them enormous confidence. We're very lucky. We work with the most, we work with the most amazing people.
Yeah.
We work with the most amazing people. So, how's your pizza?
It's great, thank you. Really nice.
Good.
Pizza in Asia, so it's a nice treat.
So, tell me, if we were to write a new Broken Sword, what advice would you give us?
Oh, that's hard. Keep being funny. The best parts of the games are the funny bit. Like, my favourite part of Broken Sword 5 was the for noodle scene. Like, it means very little, like, in relation to the whole game, but for noodle was just brilliant. Keep bringing Lady Fairmont in. Her scenes are always just fantastic. I like the Kickstarter. If you wanted to do another Kickstarter, then I'd be like all over that. I thought it was brilliant. It brought such a great community together.
Oh, it was great, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And we've even got we've had some Revolution relationships and Revolution babies, and it's just great to bring people together.
Yeah, no, it was a really great time.
One of the I think Wendy's going to end this fairly soon. I think she's hovering. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep talking, and I'm not going to even break for one moment, and she won't have the opportunity. But
God damn it!
Can I tell you? I don't know if you remember in Broken Sword 5, we had a place called Montsegur, which is a beautiful, beautiful place in the Pyrenees. And the Cathars, which I'm kind of slightly obsessed with, and I think they're just incredible, because they're dualists. They believed that there's a good God and a bad God, the God of the material and the God of the spiritual. And in many ways, the God of the material, which is the Roman Catholic God, was the bad God. And the God of the spiritual is the good God. And that then brings in the idea of Lucifer, Lux Ferre, the bringer of light. So Lucifer is Lux Ferre. He is the enlightened mankind or personkind. And this all of this sort of interesting stuff. But let me tell you briefly, because this is sort of part of the history that I think is so interesting. One of the problems, of course, is that when you research, there's so much lunatic stuff on the internet that if you want to be credible, you really have to make sure that it's a credible source, and there are plenty of non-credible sources. But one of the stories that really inspired me was there's a woman called Elaine Pagels, who is a professor of theology at Princeton University, and she wrote a very interesting book about the Gnostic Gospels. Now, basically, I'll explain what they are in a minute, but in this book, she describes how an Egyptian farmer in about 1940 was digging for soft soil in a place called Nag Hammadi, which is Upper Egypt, so southern Egypt, up the Nile, and came across a pot, and he hoped it was something valuable, so he smashed it and was very disappointed it was full of manuscripts. So he took them home, and his mother used some for the fire and some for the animals, and then a friend came along and said, no, give them to me, I'll take them into Cairo and I'll sell them illegally. And it was only relatively recently that when this incredible collection of illegal manuscripts, the Gnostic Gospels, started appearing around the world, that people realized and took it back to the source, and ultimately took it back to this farmer. And the Gnostic Gospels are important because around about the time of the Nicaea, which was about 350, the church fathers, and I believe that actually it was Constantine of York, decided that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were going to be the canon, and that everything else was heretical. So the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, the Gospel of Philip, the Gospel of Thomas were all declared heretical. And
another reason to dismiss all of the Thomases that we know. See, I got you to stop talking.
This is doubting Thomas. this is doubting Thomas. And what's fascinating is that one of the Gospels is the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, which I'd never even heard of, and it was one of the Gnostic Gospels that was destroyed. And in it, if you read it, it's fascinating, because in it, Mary, it starts after the death of Jesus, and in it, Mary says, Jesus gave me special knowledge, secret knowledge. And Peter, who became the first pope, was furious about this and said, why would Jesus give a woman secret knowledge? And Levi jumps, who's also one of the Gnostics, jumps to her defense and says, that Jesus loved Mary more than any of us. And this is where Dan Brown gets a lot of his sort of fanciful ideas from. But what I think is absolutely fascinating is that obviously the Orthodox Church persecuted the Gnostics. But if the Gnostics had won, if religion had derived from the Gnostics, then they believed in equality. They believed that women and men were absolutely equal. They were different, but they were equal. The priests could be the perfect, could be men or women. And imagine what the world would have been like had that happened instead of Peter becoming the first pope and then the patriarchy and everything that went with that. Why am I telling you all this? I have no idea. Sorry, you're looking rather bewildered.
That's very interesting.
But the Cathars had their last stand in a place called Montségur in 1244, and when the children were very young, I went there, and this was a tiny village. I think it's 300 people. Tiny village in the heart of the Pyrenees, but incredibly significant because the Cathars are Gnostics. So the last of the Gnostics were destroyed. The last holy man was killed in about 1312, and because the church hated them so much. But I wanted to go pay homage. This was 20 years ago, and drove in there, and there was a tiny little hotel. And he said, "Look, they're full. We're the only hotel, I'm afraid. So you have to go to the nearest village, well, it's a town called Le Lavany." So I walked back through the darkness to my car, and I was about to get in, and a window opened from a nearby house, and a woman stuck her head out, and she said, "Monsieur, vous cherchez un hôtel? You're looking for a hotel?" And I replied, "Oui, je cherche un hôtel. Pourquoi?" She said, "Je suis un hôtel. I'm a hotel. You're welcome." So we went into this place, and it felt like it had been completely lost in the 1930s. Nothing had changed. We had thick linen sheets. The children were terrified because doors opened and closed. I mean, it was absolutely haunted. But the amazing thing is that when Umberto Eco, and I don't know if you're a fan of Umberto Eco at all, but Name of the Rose and Foucault's Pendulum and many others. When he was researching Foucault's Pendulum, he'd actually stayed there. And when Paulo Coelho, who again you may or may not know, but when he was writing, he stayed there. And a wonderful character called Otto Rahn, who had joined the SS, and
that's a good time to call it.
I think that is a good time, and he'd stayed there too. So all of these stories are all of the ones that are bubbling round. So that's it.
Together and again.
Alice, you've been absolutely brilliant, but I haven't let you get a word in edgeways. I'm so sorry.
It's fine. I don't have half as many interesting stories as you.
I beg to differ. I think what's interesting about people is that whatever they focus on, can become a passion, and as long as you tell it passionately, anything is interesting.
That's true.
We have a few questions for our dinner guests, both of you. But I would like you to answer first, Alice. So Wiggly wants to know, whose idea was it to put... Oh, no, that's not it. Sorry. It was over the pineapple pizza. Sorry. Gosh, I had such a good question highlighted. Okay, let's just start.
Whose idea was it? Whose idea was it to create the Order of the Goat?
Yeah, you know what? Let's talk about this. Let's say about the Order of the Goat. Whose idea was that? But then Charles has to talk first, and he's chewing.
I don't know.
So I think I remember Nina mentioning something about that. That it was so strong in the Kickstarter forums that they actually included the 777 on the billboard outside of the concept art of the bistro in Broken Swords 5, right? Have you noticed that? Yeah, probably, because you're a great fan. Anyway, whose idea was it to put a pair of Geordies on the train near the end of Broken Sword 1? Whoever it was, I love you. It's such a novelty that an accent is used in games.
Well, that was. Am I talking first, or I suppose it would be very difficult for Alice to actually answer that one. So
yeah.
I better go first.
Yeah, that wouldn't be very convincing.
My writing partner in crime for Broken Sword 1 and Broken Sword 2 was a fellow called Dave Cummins. And Dave Cummins had worked with me at Activision when I was running development there. And he was a tester. But he wrote so beautifully. And I remember him writing a test report for an adventure, a text adventure, which really wasn't very good. And he wrote his report so much better than the writer had written the text adventure. So when I wanted to found RevoOolution, I invited him to come and work as our writer. And he had a wicked sense. I mean, he was very troubled in many ways, but he had a wicked sense of humor. And I think I'm going to give him all the credit for creating those Geordies, because I thought we'd offend all the fine people of Newcastle. Because I live in York now and have done for the last 30 years, and I love Newcastle. I think it's a great city. And I'm amazed that Geordies have a great sense of humor. And I think it's fantastic that people who are from that part of the world, from the northeast of England, actually really appreciate that you've got two drunk Geordies who actually are really good guys, but they are stereotypical Geordies.
Oh yeah, there's a question I wanted to. Yeah, it's interesting. There's a question I wanted to answer. I wanted answers for, but it scrolled down again. God damn it! I should have copied it out. Honestly, gosh, I'm sorry.
Do you know, Alice? I do remember you really well now from BAFTA.
Yes.
You were standing with a group of about 5 or 6 people, weren't you?
Yes.
Against the back wall, and there were some photographs taken.
Yeah, there's a photograph of all of us together, I think.
Yep.
I found it. What are the unique challenges of writing adventure game dialogues when a player has different options to order in which to tackle different topics? How would you answer that, Alice?
Oh, me, sorry.
Yeah, so unique challenges of writing adventure game dialogues.
Just give me 1 second, I'm just going to plug my phone in.
Oh.
Sorry, I have a dog running around the room.
It's okay, that's really cute. Matt helped me find it because he kept auto-scrolling away. So, when you write like a game and players have different topics in order.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Okay, cool. Okay.
So if a player has different options of order in which to tackle different topics, for instance, in an adventure game in dialogue,
mm-hmm.
How do you think, is that difficult to write? What do you think you need to take into consideration when offering a player like a broader branch of investigating something? Because you said you like creating puzzles, and yeah. I think one of the most interesting puzzles is often hidden in how you extract information, right?
Yeah. That's a really hard question for someone that's learning.
No. Like, that's why I think it's interesting, right? Like, what are your opinions on that? What have you learned so far? How do you think, how do you tackle that yourself as somebody who's aspiring?
I try to work backwards, I suppose. So whatever solution you want to come from whatever puzzle you're writing, or what outcome you want, and then what makes sense to approach that outcome.
Charles, How do you? Sorry, you're still eating.
Mm.
Do you have anything
I think
to
that's
add?
a great answer. I think that's a great answer.
Because you have a quite strong take on multiple choice and multiple outcomes to things. You think that they can't really coexist.
Well, what I will argue, if I'm given the chance to, or even if I'm not given the chance to, that people can't shut me up, is to say that the idea of multiple endings is a bit crazy, because the ending is, all of us have played games or watched films or read books where it's really quite good, and then the ending lets it down. And the ending is the climax, which pays off the story so far, it pays off the character motivations, it pays off everything. And to write one really good ending is really hard. The idea that you could write 5 or 6 is, I'm afraid, to dismiss the whole of writing as a creative art form, because what you're basically saying is, I have a dogma that I want to have multiple endings, rather than I'm going to work really, really hard to get one really good one. So a lot of people, of course, who write multiple endings will think that I'm talking absolute nonsense. But to answer the earlier question, this is what, to really build on what Alice said, is working backwards. Now, if you're like LucasArts, and I love LucasArts, their puzzles are slapstick. So I have a knife here, and I have a stone here, and if I use the two together, then perhaps I can flick it out of the window and into somebody's eye, and they'll stumble and they'll fall over, and then blah, 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 all of that. Whereas obviously the stories and the puzzles that we write are much more logical. We try and make them logical within the context of the world. So that means you need to be clear on what the character motivations are, what's going on in that world, all of those things. And in many ways, that is why the characters are archetypal. I mean, I have a book, I think I pulled the book out before, which is all the Tintin characters. And what I love about the Tintin characters is that they are archetypal. You know what you're going to get. And, right from the very beginning, the Broken Sword characters were intended to have George and Nico looking, fairly normal. And then the characters that go beyond that become more and more, they're always anatomically possible, but we push them and push them and push them, and certainly use Tintin as some reference for that. I mean, we don't obviously copy the characters, because what you want, in the games that we write, is you want the archetypal characters to behave in a way that you would expect, or reverse those expectations, and that helps the puzzles, because people are then they're understanding the world, they're understanding the motivations of the characters, and they then try and subvert the world to get the characters to behave in a certain way so that they can then proceed in the game. So yes, as I say, this is a very long-winded way of saying I completely agree with what Alice said. You start at what you want to achieve and work backwards.
So Alice, do you have a different take on multiple endings?
I've played some games where I like multiple endings. I really like Heavy Rain and Fahrenheit, the Quantic Dream games, and they have multiple endings, but they are sort of all like different things can happen for different characters, but they do all come to a very similar sort of resolution unless you kind of lose the game.
So it's kind of like a fan service layer of personalized details?
Yeah, so I would agree that it's more satisfying to have a designed solution than it is to have something that maybe makes sense in very different endings, but at the same time doesn't give you a real answer.
Yeah, for instance,
I got into terrible trouble. Because the two, David Cage and Guillaume de something, who are two of the founders, collared me because I'd said that they broke every rule. Now, I really liked Heavy Rain. I thought it was a masterpiece in many ways. But one of the endings, as a big spoiler alert, has the detective that you control turning out to be the bad guy. It's many, many years. And the reason that was wrong to do, in my opinion, is that obviously in a film, you can give privileged information to the audience, or you can give privileged information to the protagonist. And it creates a sense of dread if, the audience know more than the protagonist, and there are advantages vice versa. Obviously in a game, if you give one or the other privileged information, then that screws up the gameplay, because if you know more than your character, then you will control the character in a way that is illogical for what the character knows at that particular time, or vice versa, if the character does something that you, the audience, don't know about. So the relationship in a game is quite different to the relationship in a film. And in a game, if you have this secret and you're controlling a character, you need to know something about that secret. And if you just foist it on the audience afterwards, to me, that's cheating. But David Cage didn't see it that way when I made that statement. So, and he hasn't sent me any Christmas cards since. So maybe it was something I said.
So the most important question I can find else would be pineapple on pizza. Discuss. Oh no, we broke Charles.
Go on.
No, discuss. That's it. Pineapple on pizza.
Okay, Alice?
I used to be a hard no, but I'd never actually tried it when I said that. I have tried it since, and I like pineapple on pizza. Sorry.
Wow, we have a convert. Okay. Good for you. Good for you for admitting that you actually never have tried something, giving it a good go, and changing your mind. That's brave.
I did have
Not a lot of people do
trying it.
Yeah, I guess it's hard to try something you don't like. I used to think that sushi was the most disgusting thing on the world, and I was dead wrong. Holy crap, was I wrong. It's so delicious.
It is.
Okay, so Charles is still broken. He's trying to talk, but his mouth is moving.
No. I'm going to. Right. So, a friend of mine built a pizza oven and gave me one. But built a number of pizza ovens, and he gave me one, and it is absolutely awesome, because what it does is it gets up to about 400 to 500 degrees, and an oven obviously gets very little beyond 200 degrees. So pizzas that go into ovens come out soggy because they're just not hot enough. This is just beautiful. And I remember having this conversation with an Italian, and Italians, particularly Italian boys, are very, very proud, but can be quite rude. And Emanuela, who wrote Toon Toy, which for Beyond a Steel Sky, which was brilliant, and he also in Broken Sword 3 was instrumental in the graphics. So he's done a lot for our games, and he's been fantastic. But he was just appalled by the idea that we should be cooking pizza in England. But what upset him more than anything else, you can imagine, was the toppings and the fact that pineapple was included. Anyway, so to keep him happy, we didn't obviously feed him a pizza with pineapple. But what he came up with, because honestly, making your own pizzas is wonderful, is cooked chicken with a bit of Parma ham on top of it. And what that does is it keeps the chicken really, really moist, and the Parma ham above it goes slightly crispy. And we called it after him the Emanuela, because we had to keep him on side, because he was so upset by the idea of pineapple on pizza, and that we'd been served it.
And then you served him chicken.
There was chicken with it, and then I also have a table football at home, and Italians are so good at table football. It's just outrageous. They have names. For passes between different different players on a table football. Like, we just thump the ball. That's it. Anyway, so I played him many, many years ago, and he thumped me, and we had a few beers. So we went in, and the ignominy of the pineapple was then further compounded by the fact that I thrashed him at table football, which is not what he expected, nor what I expected. But it was a very triumphant evening, nevertheless. Sorry, did you ask about table football, Wendy? Was that where this came from?
No, absolutely not. But I'm thrilled. Okay, so I want to quickly still show off the amazing artwork that that was sent in by other people, especially the ones that made it to us, because we had a really hard time choosing, Charles. You kind of
it's brilliant.
And there were two that we really, really thought were amazing. And one of them was called The Shining by Sam Trudgill. And I think he submitted it over Twitter. And is it up on stream already, Luke? Sorry, Luke is running the stream, but he's very quiet. Yeah, it is. Okay, awesome. So this was one of Charles's favorite. It really made him laugh. It was you remember? It was Joey, the yellow one with the polishing machine.
Well, Alice, would you explain why this is such fun?
I can't actually say because it's not on my screen, but I'm pretty sure if that's the one I'm thinking of.
If you go into the Discord, because we're in Discord.
Oh, yeah.
If you go into the Discord, it's the second picture I posted, the yellow one.
Which part of the Discord?
In our chat.
Oh, right, down the chat, yes.
Hold on.
Yeah. Sorry.
The Discord. Wait, how do we find our chat again? Oh no.
If you have a full screen, you need to enter full screen or press escape.
There we go.
And then there's a little chat, and you just scroll up until the second, I think it is. Yeah, The Shining.
With Mr. Shining.
What did you like about that one, Charles? Can you remember? Say something nice about it.
I want to ask Alice what she thinks.
Oh, I thought it was really funny. It really made me laugh. Caught me off guard as well. When you realise it is Mr. Shining. Great, that was one of the best.
It was really good. So basically, it's obviously the Jack Nicholson The Shining is so brilliant and so terrifying, and this is Mr. Shiny. What's he called? His shiny machine?
Polishing machine.
It's polishing machine. Mr. Shiny. I think he calls him Mr. Shiny. Yeah. In the hospital, and so this is obviously the play on the fact that The Shining is such a terrifying film, but The Shining is Mr. Shiny, the polishing machine cleaning the hospital floor. So it was just really clever. It was really clever.
Yeah, so that was from Sam Trudgill, and I don't know, I just thought it was so cute. And then there was another one that also we thought was nice enough to include. It was somebody who submitted 3 pictures, actually. So let's try to get them all 3 on the screen if we can. So those are the it's called wait, I need to open the names and look at them again because they're so good. I think it was called Nico Gouliad. Then we had George Stoborg and a full view of Nico Gouliad with the little handbag of of the face. And they're all made by Liam Cuthberg or Morlock, and submitted over Discord, I believe. Do you see them?
Yeah.
Yeah. Those really...
I'm looking at some really brilliant entries. And, thank you to everybody who took the time and had the passion to actually create these extraordinary works of art.
Yeah, I'm mad impressed with it. But obviously, we can take them down now. Thank you, Luke. Obviously, there were so many great ones, but I really didn't expect people to put so much effort into them and be so creative with this. And it really cheered me up because I try to motivate people to kind of contribute and still, still show their love and also show that we still appreciate and see them when they're passionate. I'm seeing from the things. Worm17, who of course is Mckee, is in the process of putting together a Lego version. He actually did do a submission. Yeah. Can Yeah, can we get
More
that up,
impressive.
Luke? Actually, it's the little Lego
More
one.
impressive is the actual Lego. I mean, what I challenged him to do was to create a Lego stop motion of either Foster or George walking.
That's amazing. Yeah, Worms is like part of the furniture at this point.
But then again, I see Leonard, because I don't know, Alice, if you will have met Leonard. I think Leonard came to our studio. I know he came to our studio a couple of times in the development of Broken Sword 5, and was not only incredibly supportive and gave us really good feedback. I think he was in Hull at that time, so it was fairly easy to come across. So it's really nice to see some friends on this feed. I've only just loaded it up, actually.
Yeah, I tried to.
I'm sure there are many other films, and many apologies to anybody else who's on there that I should have mentioned, but yeah, those are the two names that sort of jumped out.
Yeah, Worms, Oliven is also like part of the furniture of streams that we do. Like they always try to tune in. Like we see you all.
Yeah,
and
no, it's brilliant. It's brilliant.
It's lovely to have like these like solid connections to people and like these really strong memories. Yeah. Okay, wow, it's already 7:40, guys. We need to call it. It's so late. I'm so sorry, Luke. Okay.
And Alice, I honestly I can remember you now really well. All of you guys. I remember there were 5 or 6 people who kind of were all together, knew each other, and that's presumably you're talking about the Goats people. And it was I'm really glad you enjoyed it. It was a very happy evening for me as well. So thank you for being so kind of loyal in that regard.
Oh, thank you. You were very generous.
Cool.
It was a great day.
Thank you, Wendy. I think we probably ought to let Alice and everybody else go on their merry ways and have a fun Friday evening.
Yes, guys, if you still want to hang out with us, I'm going to be in Discord, which is discord.gg/RevoOolution Software, all one word. And we're going to play some Among Us. So if you want to join, hop over there. But for now, I think that is the end of our beautiful dinner date.
Brilliant. Excellent. Thanks, guys. And thanks, everybody who's joined us. You're absolutely brilliant. And thank you, Alice. It's really nice to see you again.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, Gigi. Bye-bye.